When John doubted and sent his disciples to Jesus, Jesus could very easily have said, John, are you backsliding? Are you losing out with God? I remember when you used to call me the Lamb of God, and now you are sending messengers to me. Are you really the one that should come? Yet you saw the dove, you heard the voice, and you testified this is the one that was to come. What's happened, John? He didn't do that at all. He let John's disciples stay with him that day, and when he got through, all he gave him was a quotation from Isaiah in the Old Testament. And this quotation is the one that Mr. Brubaker read to you. When it says here, go back and tell John, and this is really a quotation, the blind see, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear, the dead are raised up. What is he doing? He is giving to John evidence from which John can draw the conclusion that the prophecy of Isaiah has been fulfilled, so that he is reaching back in the Old Testament and also reaching into today and is saying what Isaiah said is coming to pass. But he let John draw his own conclusions and found no fault with him for his momentary doubt. I have never yet been worried by an honest doubter, the dishonest doubter, who uses doubt as a subterfuge, as a dodge, as a hedge, as a refuge. This man I have nothing but contempt for. But the man who wants the truth, I will work with him on his doubts as long as I need to. Let's take another one, which we'll come to again some weeks from now. But let's take the account of Jesus in the upper room. Jesus has been dead. He has been buried. He has been raised from the dead. He has appeared to the 10 disciples who told Thomas that they had seen him. And Thomas has said, no, it is impossible for the dead to live again. I couldn't believe that. Why? I couldn't believe that unless I took my finger and I put it into the holes where the nails went in his hands. I couldn't believe that you're telling me unless I put my hand up where the Roman soldier put his spear under the rib cage and into his heart and put my hand in his side. I couldn't believe without that. When Jesus appeared to the 11 with Thomas present in the upper room, he could very easily have said, Thomas, you have traveled for three and a half years with these men. You knew all 10 of them to be honest men, honorable men who would not lie to you, and yet they have told you they have seen me, and you say, I don't believe it. And you've actually made every one of them to be dishonest. You've called them, in effect, liars. Why didn't you believe? He didn't do that at all. All he did was he said, Thomas, my hand. Thomas, my side. Thomas never used his finger. Thomas never used his hand. He fell on his knees and said, my Lord and my God. And I think that we ought to recognize that the method Jesus uses is the right method. If a man wants the truth, God will give him adequate evidence to satisfy his honest doubt. No amount of evidence will satisfy a dishonest doubter, but there's sufficient evidence for every honest man. If I get a person who needs God, whose life is tangled up and he's not ready yet to make Christ his Lord, I have a very standard procedure that I try to use. I try to lead him to the point that I'll ask him, friend, I don't want to make a liar out of you, and I surely don't want you to go any further tonight or today than you're ready to go. But do you really want the truth? And if he means business, he will say yes. And I say, all right, then, we're not going to pray for any more than that. We will pray. You pray after me and follow me. Dear God, teach me the truth. Show me the truth. And I will follow it. I have no doubt in my mind at all about the adequacy of that prayer, nor what will be the outcome of that man being open to God. Because I believe that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And just as he provided the adequate evidence to John, and that is he provided the adequate evidence to Thomas, he'll provide the adequate evidence to you or any other honest doubter in the entire world. So these disciples go back and they tell John, and Jesus then gives a very fine statement about the value of the ministry of John. We'll take Matthew 11:10 through 12 for this.
This is he of whom it is written, Behold, I send my messenger before thy face, who shall prepare thy way before thee. Truly I say to you, among those born of women, there has risen no one greater than John the Baptist. Yet he who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has suffered violence, and men of violence take it by force.
For all the prophets in the law prophesied until John. If you're willing to accept it, as we said the other day, this is the Elijah who's to come. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. This is a statement again which is echoed over in the book of Revelation. And then he has a very interesting little comparison. He's talking about the unreasonableness of the dishonest doubter. In other words, in a sense, this looks like a change of subject, but it's almost the same subject. Here we have in the case of John an honest doubter, and Jesus gave him evidence. Then he talked about the dishonest doubter, and will you read for us in verses here now, 16 down through 19.
But to what shall I compare this generation? It is like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling to their playmates, We piped to you, and you did not dance. We wailed, and you did not mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say, He has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, Behold, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is justified by her deeds.
Jesus is always picking illustrations out of every day. And children, of course, imitate their elders. I recall a minister friend of mine and his son, they had a little goat, and the goat died, and the son went out and he had a funeral. He got his friends together and they had a funeral, and this preacher's son preached the goat funeral. And then they went out and they buried the little baby goat that had died. Funerals were a big part of life in those hard days in which Jesus lived, and the streets were always being filled with the long procession of mourners. Sometimes there weren't really too many friends, and so there were people who earned their living by being paid to weep at funerals. You find this when we come to the story of Jairus and his daughter who died. And by the time Jesus got there, the paid mourners were already there, and they were weeping. And to show you how insincere their weeping was, when Jesus said, Don't weep, she's just asleep, they quit weeping and laughed him to scorn. They could turn it on, turn it off. They're paid mourners. And the children see this. And so they play funeral. They say, one of them says here, let's play funeral. No, we don't want to play funeral. Okay, let's play marriage, which is the very opposite. That's a joyous occasion. It's the weddings are so important in Eastern culture that they lasted sometimes a week. Almost bankrupt. A man goes in debt for life almost to give his daughter the wedding. And they have this elaborate ritual, and it's a great time of celebration. And so they say, well, if you don't want to play funeral, let's play marriage. They don't want to play marriage either. Jesus is saying some folks are awfully hard to satisfy. And then he compares this to John the Baptist himself. So John the Baptist came, he didn't go to the cities. I went to the cities. He didn't eat with you. I ate with you. He didn't drink with you. I've taken part in your feasts. And he said, you said about John the Baptist, since he didn't do these things, he's antisocial. He has a demon. And you say about me, he overeats, he's a wine bibber. He said, you just can't satisfy some people, no matter what you do. And he used John the Baptist himself as illustrations.